some positive leftist news with Mexi.
Happy May Day, everyone! With COVID still raging and keeping us distant, what better way to celebrate is there than to rejoice in the wins that workers have achieved in the past month through collective struggle. In next month's episode, we'll look back at all of these celebrations and the actions that were kicked off today and what they have led to, but solidarity with all workers today and always. After unhoused folks in Kansas City staged a 2-month encampment at City Hall, which escalated under threat of eviction, the Kansas City Homeless Union has won a major victory. Their strength and persistence won them at least 111 heavily subsidized homes, 500 hotel rooms to facilitate a transition to permanent housing, and a guaranteed seat at future negotiation tables with the city. This exciting victory could be the beginning of a social housing program in Kansas City. In the UK, a landmark decision by the High Court has ruled that city councils can now provide emergency housing during the pandemic to unhoused people who would not normally qualify for support based on their asylum status. The decision is the result of a lawsuit fought by 61-year-old Timon Nakub, a refused asylum seeker from Zimbabwe who was denied emergency housing by Brighton and Hove City Council in September and was thus forced to live on the streets. He was referred by Voices in Exile, an organization that supports refugees, asylum seekers, and those with no recourse to public support in Brighton, to Law Stop solicitors, who took up his case. Timon is now housed in the Home Office accommodation in Swindon, and the ruling has implications for countless others in his situation. But the fight continues to ensure that people without recourse to public funds aren't left out in the streets once the pandemic is over. Workers at the Animal Legal Defense Fund, an organization that for 4 decades has worked to advance the interests of animals through the legal system, have secured an election victory in their effort to unionize. Their union, ALDF United, was certified this month after a long battle with the employer. Back in December, eligible workers had announced that a supermajority had signed cards to form a union and authorized the Nonprofit Professional Employees Union, IFPTE Local 70, to be their representative. The CEO, Stephen Wells, and the rest of ALDF management refused to voluntarily recognize the union at that time and were actively hostile to it, but ALDF United's recent election victory and union certification means that management cannot undo it. The ALDF is the first organization of its kind in the animal liberation movement to unionize, and ALDF United seeks to create a workplace that is anti-racist and more cooperative, equitable, inclusive, and just, where workers are paid living wages and have more control over their workplaces. New Zealand is officially raising its minimum wage to $20 per hour and increasing the top tax rate on high-end earners to 39%, as well as delivering on small increases to unemployment and sickness benefits. The wage increase will affect up to 175,000 workers, whereas the tax increase will only affect anyone making more than $180,000 per year, or about 2% of New Zealanders. This year, the government estimates it will bring in an additional $550 million in revenue, which the Social Democratic government intends to spend on affordable housing, healthcare, education, and job training. In a blow to the racist war on drugs, the state of New Mexico has legalized weed. Starting this summer, New Mexicans of legal age will be able to both possess and grow marijuana. Democrat Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham also signed a companion bill that will clear the criminal records of people with past marijuana convictions. This piece of legislation goes even further than California and other states, as it also forbids local governments from issuing blanket bans on legal weed sales in their jurisdictions. And this isn't a win yet, but an inspiring campaign that we'll keep our eye on. Elton Debresci, leader of the United Miners of Bukiza Trade Union of Albania, is running as an independent candidate for parliament. According to the Miners Union, we have paid the highest price for export revenues generated by the chromium mines in Albania, which amounted to over 100 million euros in 2018. We live in one of the poorest regions of the country and work in what is notoriously known as the death shafts, so that before we start working, we greet each other, "May you come out alive." After fighting for their rights for 30 years, going on hunger strikes but being ignored, the union recently secured 11,000 petition signatures to secure minor status and are supporting Elton Debresci to try to force working class issues in parliament. We will follow up on their struggle as it progresses, but solidarity to working people in Albania who are fighting for change. In Manila, in the Philippines, people are coming together and forming mutual aid community pantries to address the problem of food insecurity during the pandemic. One such pantry, the Maguinao Community Pantry, is serving fresh produce and other local food to those in need. The idea behind the program is simple: give whatever you can, take only what you need. During the second week of April, the community pantry served 3,000 people. The program has been so successful that its model has been replicated all throughout the island nation. Anna Patricia Non, the founder of the initiative, said that the growing number of community food programs was a wake-up call that is telling the government about people's food insecurity. Given the pantry's sustainability, it also serves to combat the classist notion that poor people will take advantage of such programs. Continuing along the line of community food programs, you know those free mini libraries you see here and there? Well, Jamela Anderson, a community activist based in Albany, New York, has replaced the library with a fridge. Free Food Fridge Albany seeks to combat food apartheid in the city's neglected, racialized areas. Like the Maguinao Community Pantry, the Free Food Fridge Albany program is maintained by donations, and the fridge is emptied and restocked every day. Anderson seeks to expand her program into other neighborhoods and eventually turn it into a nonprofit. I've seen this free community fridge idea replicated elsewhere as well, which is fantastic. Mutual aid is the future. After more than 10 years of work, the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network has put down a payment on a property that's the future site of the Detroit People's Food Co-op. As part of the model, shoppers can also become part owners of the store by purchasing a $200 membership share, and more than 1,100 people have already done so. At the end of the year, if there are any profits, they can either vote themselves a percentage, vote to invest the profits in the store, or vote to donate the revenue to any nonprofit. This will be the first co-op in Detroit since the Cass Corridor Food Co-op ended in 2004 after serving the community for decades. Construction is expected to begin this summer. Canada's New Democratic Party, which is our Social Democrat Party, held their national convention on April 9th. After years of struggling against party brass, the Courage Coalition was able to get a resolution supporting BDS onto the floor for a vote, where it passed with flying colors. 80% of the NDP convention delegates voted in support of a resolution that recognizes the human rights of Palestinians. The Palestine resolution makes it an official policy of the NDP to fight for an end to Canada's support for illegal settlements and to suspend the flow of weapons to and from Israel until Palestinians are free. The resolution marks one of the most progressive positions on Palestine adopted by a major party in Canada and was made possible by years of tireless activism. Its passing was applauded by independent Jewish voices, along with a broad array of NDP MPs, Palestinian rights activists, faith organizations, community groups, and labor unions. In addition to legalizing weed, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham has signed the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, which effectively bans qualified immunity. As we reported in New York, qualified immunity effectively protects law enforcement from liability even when they knowingly break the law. New Mexico is now the second state to abolish it, Colorado having done so in June of 2020. Under the new law, a person can sue the state, a city, or a county when their rights under the state's constitution have been violated, such as in cases involving police misconduct. With the passing of this law, residents of New Mexico will have a better chance of holding the armed protectors of private property to account. In a show of working-class solidarity, the Minneapolis Transit Union Local 100 refused to aid police by transporting arrested protesters for them in the wake of the murder of 20-year-old Duante Wright. The Amalgamated Transit Union, to which Local 100 is a part, put out a statement in support of its workers' decision, reading, "ATU Local 1005 applauds our members' stand and continues to support our members in the struggle for Black Lives Matter." This action is in keeping with the events of last summer when transit workers all over America refused to transport arrested BLM protesters fighting against police brutality and systemic racism. We absolutely love to see it. The Virginia Supreme Court overturned a circuit court decision that prevented the city of Charlottesville from removing a monument of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, paving the way for its removal. The statue was a focal point for the Unite the Right rally in 2017, where Heather Heyer was tragically killed by a white supremacist. Its removal is thus highly symbolic. And an update on a story from last month where dedicated high school students in Kansas organized to change the name of their school and school district as it is named after a former KKK leader. This month, the Board of Education pledged $70,000 to start moving forward on discussions to change the name and will be working with the Kansas Leadership Center to do so. Some activists are frustrated that this should take so long and be so costly, but the efforts of these students are starting to pay off. Members of the Sinixt tribe are celebrating this month as the Canadian Supreme Court ruled in support of their rights to their territory. Canada had previously declared that the Sinixt people were extinct, but descendants in Washington fought back against this. One man in particular, Richard Desautel, challenged British Columbia over his right to hunt and access the territory for other activities. The Sinixt live on both sides of the US-Canada border, and many Sinixt people are now members of other bands in Canada and the US. It's been illegal for members in the US to come up and exercise their rights in British Columbia since 1896. The ruling, which only focuses on hunting rights, sets up the Sinixt as rights holders no matter where they live. Rodney Costin, chairman of the Confederate Tribes of the Colville Reservation and Sinixt Confederacy, said the ruling is a first step. He said, "We're going to continue that work of addressing our Aboriginal title again back in Canada and also recognition of all those areas for our people of where they once lived that are very sacred to us still today. This is a landmark decision." After a decades-long fight for their land rights, the Guarani Kaiowá indigenous people in what is now the Brazilian state of Mato Grosso do Sul have successfully appealed to review the process around a past case that canceled the demarcation of their territory. Brazil's Supreme Federal Court unanimously accepted the appeal, paving the way to annul a 2014 ruling that halted the territory's demarcation process. This is a landmark decision that could bolster Indigenous land rights and is a major setback for President Bolsonaro, who declared his opposition to any Indigenous territorial demarcation during his administration. The Guararapes territory was recognized as an Indigenous territory in 2004 by FUNAI, the federal agency tasked with protecting Indigenous interests, and demarcation began in 2009 before unjustly being thrown out in 2014. While this latest ruling does not overturn the 2014 decision, the reopening of the case marks a turning point and sets an important precedent for other disputes over Indigenous lands in Brazil, according to Juliana de Paulo Batista, a lawyer with a nonprofit that defends the rights of Indigenous people. She said it wasn't just any victory, it was a victory by unanimous vote. All the judges agreed that in a legal proceeding that harmed Indigenous people and did not give them the opportunity to participate, the proceeding must be annulled. New Mexico's been doing the most this month. In addition to the previous two entries, their state senate has passed a bill that would prohibit discrimination based on traditional hairstyles and head coverings. Once signed, hair-based discrimination will be prohibited in the workplace and in schools. The bill was spearheaded by Black civil rights advocates, as currently employers can pressure workers to chemically straighten natural hair or cut dreadlocks in order to conform to employee dress codes. The bill was also strongly supported by Native American residents who say they've been discriminated against for wearing Native hairstyles. A high-profile assault of a Native high school student whose hair was cut by a teacher figured prominently in the debate over the bill. Religious leaders say it will provide further protection for residents who wear head coverings for religious purposes. Burkina Faso's exiled ex-president Blaise Compaoré is to be tried for the assassination of his predecessor Thomas Sankara, a Pan-African icon, during the 1987 coup in which Compaoré took power. Compaoré and 13 others face charges of complicity in murder and concealing the body of Sankara and several aides who were killed alongside him. These charges come 34 years after the death of the father of the Burkinabe Revolution. The former president has been in exile in the Ivory Coast since 2014 when he was swept from power by mass protests triggered by his attempt to extend his tenure. He will therefore be tried in absentia. It is gutting to think where the country could be today if the revolution had survived, but at least there may be some justice for Sankara. In opposition to federal and state laws guaranteeing freedom of choice for transgender students regarding bathroom use, a middle school assistant principal and a 7th grade teacher in Grants Pass, Oregon started a petition which received 90 signatures calling for anatomically male and anatomically female bathrooms. If there was any doubt that the kids are alright, let it be quashed by 8th grader Stephanie and several of her classmates who began immediately protesting the petition on April 8th. The students put up posters inside the school, wrote their pronouns on their foreheads and wrote slogans on their face masks demanding equity. Stephanie also started an online petition to fire the staff members, getting more than 300 signatures. Students are now holding in-person protests in front of the school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, demanding the responsible staff be fired. The teacher and principal have currently been suspended. New Zealand workers who suffer a miscarriage will now have paid leave as lawmakers unanimously approved the motion this month. Employees in the country will be entitled to 3 days leave after a miscarriage under the law. The Labour MP who introduced the bill, Ginny Anderson, said it would make New Zealand only the second country to provide such a benefit to her knowledge. India allows 6 weeks of leave after a miscarriage. Although 3 days is arguably not enough, it is an important recognition that shockingly few states provide. Anderson said in Parliament, "I can only hope that while we may be one of the first, we will not be one of the last, and that other countries will also begin to legislate for a compassionate and fair leave system that recognizes the pain and the grief that comes from miscarriage and stillbirth." According to a survey by pollster Ipsos Peru, the Peruvian socialist Pedro Castillo is poised to win the presidency in a second-round ballot set for June. The poll showed him garnering 42% against 31% for right-wing rival Keiko Fujimori. Castillo, a previously little-known union leader and teacher, took a surprise win in the first round of the election this past month. He plans on nationalizing important industries such as mining. The support he's received already is momentous, but Peru is heading for a polarizing election in June. In Greenland, a pro-independence Democratic Socialist Party has won the early election to the parliament and is set to form government. In total, 80% of the votes cast went to pro-independence candidates. For those who aren't aware, Greenland is seeking independence from Denmark. The Democratic Socialist Inuit Ataqatigiit, or IA party, has won 36.6% of the votes, overtaking the Social Democrat Siumut party, which won 29.4% of the votes. A major issue dividing them is a major rare earth and uranium mining project, which IA opposes on environmental grounds. New Zealand will force banks to reveal the impact that their investments have on climate change under world-first legislation intended to make the financial sector's environmental record transparent. Commerce Minister David Clark said the law would make climate reporting mandatory for banks, insurance companies, and investment firms, forcing financial institutions to consider the real-world impact their investments have on the climate and allowing the public to gauge their performance. Climate Change Minister James Shaw said the annual reports will likely make high-carbon investments less attractive as institutions are scrutinized. A jury has cleared 6 Extinction Rebellion protesters of charges for causing criminal damage to Shell's London headquarters, despite the fact that the judge directed jurors that they had no defense in law. The 6 were also cleared of individual counts of having an article with intent to destroy or damage property. They explained they had targeted the Shell building because the oil giant was directly contributing to the climate crisis, thereby causing serious injury and death, and argued that it was a necessary and proportionate response to the harm being caused. Although they had no defense in law, the jurors acquitted them of both charges anyway, as they were morally justified. This is major solidarity, and we love to see it. And as always, cutest news saved for the end. While it is unfortunate that it took a global pandemic for this to happen, we are happy to report that the number of one-horned rhinos in Nepal has increased to its highest point in more than 20 years. In the latest count, the rhino population has reached 752, up by more than 100 animals from 2015. According to Haribhadra Acharya, information officer at Nepal's Department of National Parks and Wildlife Conservation, the rise in population was a result of a number of changes, including a rejuvenation of natural habitats due to the pause in tourism. Comrades, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to veganvanguardpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you to Javi for the positive news jams, thank you to Halcyon for the positive news background, and thank you to Tristan for editing this video. Thank you also to our wonderful Patreons. You make the show possible. If you would like to become a sustaining member, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews. Thank you also to everyone who has given a one-time PayPal donation. The link is in the description box below.
Sometimes